What's up, New Hope family? Welcome to the Grow Podcast. My name is David. With me, as always, is Pastor Leo. We are here to help you take a next step in your relationship with Jesus. We're so glad you're here. Hello and welcome, New Hope family, to episode 115 of the Grow Podcast. 115, Leo.
115.
We're getting up there.
That's awesome.
And episode 13, then, of our study on Romans, as we're going to start in chapter 7 today. Very excited. Hello, Leo.
Hello.
How are things?
Kamusta, everyone? I'm great.
Kamusta, everyone but Haniel.
Yeah, except Haniel.
I came and said hello over, to some of my PH friends over there, which, by the way, if you see me in there, just say hello. I don't know everybody's name yet, so I feel like I'm bothering people when I come in there, but I don't care if I'm bothering Haniel or Leo, so I'm okay bothering them. But hello to all of our PH family as well. But I went and said hello to him after your guys' service, and he was like, "Don't get discouraged about learning Tagalog words just because of me." I was like, "Oh, he listened. Good job." So hey, Haniel, how you doing, buddy?
There we go.
And you did discourage me, and I'm devastated.
Oh no.
By it,
Yeah.
But Cheryl was nice after that, so now I'm back on board.
He's done learning Tagalog because of you.
It's all over. I was going to be fluent.
Right.
By probably episode like 118.
You blew it. You ruined it.
We're going to be in Romans 7, the first 12 verses of Romans 7. So if you haven't read yet, I encourage you to do that. And if you've missed any of the other ones, check those out first, because we really do kind of build on top of each other, as Pastor Leo's teaching us.
Right.
And as always, as I can smell, and if you're on the video podcast, you can probably see. I don't think we have like a smell podcast yet. Michael's saying no. Our producer says we have not come up with the ability to We're close. Okay, we're getting there.
Right. We're getting there.
We're working on it every day. Michael will try to translate smells through our podcast.
We'll come up with a scratch and sniff kind of.
Scratch and sniff podcast. We mail out scratch and sniff cards for every week of the podcast. Maybe if eventually we'll put our podcast on Patreon or something, and if you subscribe at the $10 level, we'll send out scratch and sniffs for every. We're not doing that. That's not going to happen.
No.
But you have brought some more Filipino food.
Last week
we ate a cake. It was probably the least scary version of the Filipino food segment of the podcast.
That's true. Like it's something that you're very familiar with. That one is called biko.
Biko?
Remember the one pig? This one is bees. Biko.
Biko.
Yeah.
What is it?
It's remember the glutinous rice flour?
Okay, yeah.
That's the the traditional way of making that is using glutinous rice, but it can be made too using regular rice. So
Michael, come get your bite.
It's rice.
It's rice and what? And what else?
Rice and
goop,
coconut milk.
Okay.
And sugar.
It doesn't look bad. Is this sweet?
It is sweet.
Oh, okay.
It's the past two episodes are more like festival foods.
Ooh, I love festivals.
Michael
is claiming this.
Yeah.
Wait, before I give it to you.
It's these are
That's
food
not bad. Here you go.
that we serve
I
during
ate all the cake.
special
You can
occasions.
Ooh, this is good.
That's biko.
Biko.
It's Biko.
Who made
Biko.
this one?
One of the ladies who go to PH
Okay.
too.
Now, sorry, let me chew here real quick.
Okay.
Somehow my mom will find out if I'm talking with food in my mouth.
Oh no.
Wow. It's got like a brown sugar kind of taste to it almost. That's nice. Andy, was it Okoi that I really liked? The deep fried thing? Did you see her comment on the
Yes.
She really threw you under the bus.
Yes, she did.
And I certainly, no offense to Andy, but I think that's how I want to eat it. I don't think you over fried it. I thought it was perfect. So maybe, I guess Andy's just going to have to make me some more Okoi that isn't over fried, and then I can compare the two.
Read between the lines. Read between the
But
lines.
I was cracking up as I read that. I keep forgetting to mention it on here.
Right.
I thought it was hilarious that she just no thought just threw you right under the bus.
Yep, okay.
Okoi. See what I did there?
There we go.
Well, man, that was good. Michael's almost finished it already over there. Well, thank you. Sorry, what was the name of the person you said to me?
Angelina, I believe.
Angelina. Well, thank you, Angelina. Again, favorite tradition of the Grow Podcast has been you bringing us delicious food every single week.
We'll have to bring you
food
balut
we've never tried.
sometime.
No, not that one. Other than that one.
No, thank you.
Other than that one.
No.
Oh,
Sure.
man. I can't. Was it Leroy that was eating it that day? Was it? Oh,
It was.
man.
It was Leroy.
Poor kid. What a nightmare. Well, let's jump into Romans.
Okay.
Again, we're in Romans 7 today, starting chapter 7, verses 1 through 12. So like we do every single... Now, I read this earlier in the week, and then I read it again this morning.
Yeah.
Just to prepare for the podcast, and was taking some of my notes, and man, this is a confusing set of verses.
It is.
And this certainly isn't the first time I've read it, but I'm like, what is happening? Like, what happened to Paul? He just hit us with the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life. He's like, I peaked, and now I'm going just in complete insanity.
I think this part of the letter, he was like writing it at like 2-3 p.m.
Yeah, okay. That actually makes sense. Right. It does remind me of some papers I wrote in college, like at 4 a.m., and then I read them in the morning. I'm like, well, it's too late to replace it now, but that was a disaster.
And paper was very expensive that day. So.
Give us, like always, the ideas and points we should walk away from this, different set of verses that we're going through today.
Okay, well, Paul goes into a topic that many Christians find confusing.
Don't gesture towards me.
Namely David.
Yeah, mostly me.
So what is the relationship of a Christian to the law? And by the law, we don't just mean the 10 Commandments, but also the other 603 for a grand total of 613 laws.
That's a lot of laws.
That is a lot of laws.
So there's always a lot of opinions and views. Some are more popular than others, but there's about the laws and their relevance today. Goodness gracious, the fights over having the 10 Commandments in like courthouses, I feel like was my entire like junior high and high school era of my life. Every day there was another news story. This town is fighting about the 10 Commandments. So some people still are like, well, the 10 Commandments are still there, but we don't really have to worry about the other 603 of them, or or the dietary laws, or some people are just like, it's completely irrelevant. It's kind of all over the place these days. What does Paul say to us about the relevance of the law?
Paul uses marriage as an analogy. So see, it's not just me and Pastor
Mike. I was going to say, you do that a lot.
Right? See, it's not just me and Pastor Mike. We got it from Paul. So blame Paul. So he uses marriage as an analogy to describe our relationship to the law. The basic principle is this: the law no longer governs people's lives after they die. Like, you're married until one of you dies, and then you're no longer married. She can go marry someone else. It's not adultery, because the husband or the wife is already passed away. So in Galatians chapter 2, 19 to 21, Paul says that we died to the law through Jesus' death. So because of this, the Old Testament law no longer has jurisdiction over those who believe. Now, instead of following the law out of fear of punishment, Christians serve Jesus out of love and thanksgiving.
Which, at least that's how we should do it. It was interesting. I was watching a video on, like, I'm a nerd, so there were some cool history videos I was watching, and then it's a Jewish man who makes the videos, and he was doing videos on the history of like the Jewish denominations, I guess you'd call them, and I didn't know anything about it, so I was listening to that. But one of the things he was pointing up about how they view the difference between the Jewish faith and the Christian faith is they have their laws, but they follow them because, again, this is like, he's a Jewish man today, not 2,000 years ago. But he says, we follow these laws because it's the best way for us to live, not out of fear of going to heaven. And I heard that, and it made me sad, because I was like, my relationship with Jesus isn't because or fear of going to hell, excuse me. Hopefully you don't have fear of going to heaven. Sometimes I misspeak, okay? Right. There's a microphone in front of my face a lot. And no, but like, our relationship with Jesus shouldn't be out of fear of going to hell.
Right.
It should be, like you said, out of love and thanksgiving. That's why we want to do what's right.
That's right.
But, this is just a total, taking us on a sidetrack here, but so often though I do feel like you said there, like we should serve Jesus out of love and thanksgiving. I feel like often we are viewed, and probably there's some truth to it, that we're just getting our get out of hell free card, and
right.
We're scared of punishment, so we want to do these things right. But that is kind of that Old Testament way of thinking, and we should be moved on to this new one. Now, I have an interesting question about this new way of thinking, under Jesus.
Okay.
Little devil's advocate, because obviously this isn't what I believe. Although sometimes I'm like, is this what I believe? No, but so if we're free from the law, right? Your words were the law has no jurisdiction over us.
Jurisdiction.
So does that mean that I can just do whatever I want?
Yes.
Like if
no, I'm just
cool.
kidding.
All right, we'll see you guys next week. No, but so like for instance, we live in North Dakota.
Yes.
In the United States of America.
Yes.
It is not legal for me to go to your home and steal your television. But if like 5 minutes from now, the governor was like, cool news, David, you can now go to Leo's home and steal his television, and it's not against the law. Like, well, now I can just do that anymore. I can do whatever I want. Like, there's no laws. It's like the Purge movies, which I've never seen, but I feel like most of us know about them. Like, just no laws. You do whatever you want.
Right.
Isn't that kind of what you're saying now?
Well,
isn't that the world we're going to end up in if that's our thought process? The law has no jurisdiction.
Not at all. We have been set free from the law because it could never make us righteous. That's what it means. We have been set free from the law, but I mean, if we end there, if we put a period there, we have been set free from the law, period, then yes, that is true.
Sure.
But there's a but there. But now we are bound by an even greater law, the law of love. And it's not just the law of love, like I love my wife. It's the law of love, of our love for Jesus.
Or like how Michael loves that food you brought today.
Oh, he does.
That might be the strongest form of love I've seen today.
Right.
Michael,
that was awesome. But now, here's the thing. Now our life is producing fruit for Jesus instead of maintaining our right standing before God. It's not maintenance anymore. We are now producing fruit. So the fruit of our righteous life is the proof of our relationship with Jesus.
Can I ask you another side note question?
Sure.
That if you might not have a perfect answer for it, and then we can just say we don't have a great answer for it right now. But if the law could never make us righteous, like why did we ever have it in the first place?
Why?
Like, why didn't we just that kind of sucks for those people,
right?
Like.
Right.
Why couldn't we jump right to Jesus? Adam sins and Jesus just pops up like, hey, I got this, guys. Like, that kind of sucks. And obviously I'm aware that God's plan for all of our, redemption and our righteousness is perfect and it's better than mine. But when I hear the phrase, the law could never make us righteous, so we have to be set free from the law, I'm like, well, then why was the law put in place in the first place? Like, that sucks.
That is so true.
Yeah.
That is so true. But we have to remember the right response when God gave the law, the right response should have been, we can't do this.
Sure.
Like, they're going to look at it, do not kill, do not lie, do not steal, do not covet, do not bear false witness against your neighbor, and all of that, and all the other 613 laws. Now that they came up with 613, the right response should have been, we can't do it, we need God's help. But what they did was, yes, we can.
Right.
And then we're going to prove it to you, God.
And he, and he even made that clear, right? It was like, here are the laws, and here's the process for how to ask for forgiveness when you here's how you sacrifice to make up for, because you're going to screw up.
Right.
Okay. That's a good answer.
That should have been a very sobering thing. It's like, we're going to have to shed blood once we do not live up to the standard.
Yeah.
The blood has to be paid. It's like, we can't do this. This is too serious already. There's no way we can do this. But no, that the response was, yeah, sure we can.
Yep.
Like, we'll prove it. It's like, okay then.
Yeah.
All right.
Jumping back into Romans here, verse 5 talks about sins bearing death or bearing fruit. Kind of brings you to Galatians 5, chapter 5, not verse 5, where it's talking about the fruits, both good. It talks about good fruits and bad fruits, much like he's doing here. So he's kind of doubling up on his point that he made in Galatians, but we'll allow it, I guess.
Yeah, we go. That's true, because we go straight to the next verse. Now that we have been released from the law, we have been released from the law. We died to it and are no longer captive to its power. Now we can serve God in the new way of living in the Spirit. So again, if it's just going back to we have been set free from the law, period, it's very messed up. But Paul goes to say that we have been released from the law. We died to it. We're no longer captive to its power, period. Now we can serve God. Now, only at that point can we really serve God in the new way of living in the Spirit.
Again, the importance of reading verses in the Bible with context.
That's
not
true.
Just pulling them out. I've said this to a lot of like younger people that I know, because it's something that I had to learn when I was younger. If you have a favorite verse, make sure you read like probably the 5 verses in front of it and the 5 verses after it, and then let me know if that's still your favorite verse.
That's true.
Because sometimes it really changes it.
That is very true. In fact, sometimes you have to read the whole chapter.
Yeah.
To really get the context.
Yep.
But yeah, that's true.
But and that's obviously so important here. So then what about, and this was happening in Paul's day a lot, obviously that's why he talks about it so much, not just in Romans, but some of his other letters. But it still happens today. It might look different, but people that still insist that we are still subject to the law.
Well, for those people, we need to remind them of 1 John chapter 4, verse 18. 1 John chapter 4, verse 18 says, if we are afraid, it is for fear of punishment. And this shows that we have not fully experienced his perfect love. John's words, not mine.
Yeah.
This shows that we have not fully experienced his perfect love. We don't serve God legally. We serve him lovingly. It is not out of legal obligation, but because of our loving relationship with him.
I think a good way to like test that too is going back to that that video I was watching. Like if somebody who knows you is looking at your faith from the outside, would they think that you are serving God because you're obliged to, because you're scared of what happens if you don't? Or would they see that, wow, like love is behind why they're following God?
And it goes back to our talk about the heart and the motivation behind why we're doing what we're doing.
I think there are times where I would be happy with the answer to that in my own life. And then there's times where I'd be like, whoa, I don't want to ask that question right now. Because there's definitely times where I'm like, I bet the people in my life see this as an obligation that I have, as opposed to a loving desire that I have.
That's true.
Yeah.
I mean, it can be both. But again,
sure.
It's just your heart behind it.
Yep.
If you're just doing it for the sake of doing it, then that's where the problem begins, or that's where the problem is.
So now we've developed a new fear in my life. I'm afraid of being afraid. And man, I'm going to need some counseling after this. All right, so let's get to the real confusing part. Verses 7 through 12 here, Paul's kind of... This is so he wrote up to verse 6, and then he took a nap and woke up at 4 a.m. to finish his paper. And
I got a letter.
And we're to this part now. So he does something we've seen him before, where he like tees himself up, asks a question so he can answer it and look smart. I love that move. But then he really gets into it here after that. So talk to us a little bit about what we're getting into here, starting in verse 7.
Okay. So this is what verse 7 is all about. The law is not sin in and of itself. The law is not sin. It's like it's nothing. It's just a law. It's not sin in and of itself. It just reveals what sin is. Obedience to the law will never give you a right standing before God. The law's purpose is to show you where you have failed. So that's why Paul says in Galatians chapter 2, verse 21, if righteousness could come by the law, then Christ died in vain.
Okay, but I grew up in a house, and I realize I've said it twice already. The word, like saying something sucks, was a bad word. So I apologize to my mom if she's listening. But again, like, man, this makes it seem like the law really sucks. Like, the purpose of the law is just to show me how I fail.
Right.
Like, that's a huge bummer. And then I'm not going to jump ahead yet, but like later on, he talks about that the law is holy. I'm like, well, the law sounds terrible. The whole
so
purpose
true.
of it is to show me as a failure.
That's so
rough,
true.
man. Sorry,
But it's
please
true.
continue.
It's Jesus' death on the cross would be unnecessary if we could gain righteousness by keeping
Sure.
the law,
Yeah.
right? The proper response, and we talked about this earlier, the proper response to the law is to realize that we can't. There's no way that we can keep its standards. None of it. Like, not even a single ounce of it. So we ask for the grace of God instead. It's like, that's the right response to the law. It's like, oh, this is too strict. I can't. Please, God, help me. But
Sure.
yeah, so because we are so good at misinterpreting God's word.
No, it's nice to be good at something, I guess. I don't know.
We're so good. We're so great at misinterpreting God's word. It has become the devil's playground, unfortunately. People have then taken the law and used it as a measuring tool for righteousness. There are people who do that. Like, this is, if you follow it, for the most part, you're following it to the letter, then you're righteous, even though your heart's not in it. Or if that is the case, then the result is you get people who are very self-righteous, and that is how so many people have misrepresented Jesus. Like, people think that the Christianity is just a bunch of laws, because bending it wherever it doesn't fit their circumstance is what they do. Where they're just gonna bend it until it fits their circumstance, and then that's your law again. So that's just how it is. So if I fail, it's not a sin; it's a mistake. We talked about this before, right? So I don't have to earn my wages. It's a mistake. There's nothing to earn. There's no wages for a mistake. There's wages for sin. But if it's my mistake, if it's my sin, it's not a sin. It's a mistake. But if you fail, that's a sin, because I'm more righteous than you. So that's how people treat the law, and so that's how they misrepresented God, and that's how they misrepresented God's love for us.
These verses, like, you start in verse 8. I'm not going to read all of them, but he basically credits the law with like bringing that sin.
Yeah.
Multiple, the one that brought life, but it brought death, for him. The one that was supposed to tell you not to covet, but it brought, it made him covet things. So I feel like he spends like 4 verses being like the law made me sin. Without it, sin is dead. And then he comes back in verse 12 and is like, I am gonna read verse 12. So he does all that. And then he goes, so the law is holy. I'm like, no, it's not. Like, what? These are like verses 7 through 12 are some of the weirdest verses in Romans to me, because I feel like he's just hammering the law in these verses. I was once alive apart from the law, but when the commandment came, sin came alive and I died. But then like at the end of verse 8, it says, for apart from the law, sin lies dead. Well, it sounds like, again, and even in the first 6 verses we read, like, once we're away from the law, there's freedom, there's life. And then verse 12, so the law is holy. Like, what? It just doesn't sound, I don't know. That's so strange to me. The law is all these things that we've talked about. And then he says, the law is holy, the commandment is holy.
It's your typical Saturday afternoon writing.
But it's not.
It's not.
Even though it feels like it is. But because I'm not the one who wrote it, Paul is.
Yeah.
Inspired by God.
Because there's nothing wrong There's nothing wrong with the law. There's nothing wrong with remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. There's nothing wrong with do not covet or do not kill or do not steal or love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all of your mind. They are holy. They are just. They are right. And they are good. But the typical human nature is we distance ourselves from the sin so we're not liable. There's nothing wrong with do not covet. But once we covet, we distance ourselves from the sin so that we're not liable. Again, that's where I wasn't coveting. It wasn't a sin. It was a mistake. That's why the fact is the commandments are not faulty. We are. It's not the commandments' fault. The commandments are not the ones that are at fault. We are the ones that are at fault. It's not the law that needs to die. It's not because I can't follow do not covet. The law needs to die.
Well, sometimes we do that with laws in this country.
Right.
We're just like, everyone's doing this, so we're just going to make it legal.
We're just going to make it legal. So that's
not how God's law works, is what you're saying.
That's not how God's law works. Like everybody kills, so let's just make killing legal, right? So it's the law does not need to die. We do because of our sin. We did nothing and can do nothing to escape the penalty. That's why we call it wages.
So it's almost like the law is good. It's just, I don't want to say incomplete, but it's not enough. But it's not enough because of us, not because of the law. Like if we were capable of fulfilling the law all on our own, that's fine. But because we're not, the law is not enough for us.
Right.
There had
it's
to be
not
more.
enough to bring us in a right standing before God. So that's the beauty of the gospel. That's the beauty of the good news that Jesus brings. A guy named Ray Comfort says it very well. You and I broke the law. Jesus paid the price. Jesus paid the penalty. Instead of us dying, think about this. Instead of us dying, Jesus died in our place. It's not just Jesus died on the cross. It's Jesus died on the cross for us. In our place. It should be us that's on that cross, but Jesus took our place. Jesus paid the penalty for our sins. We, through Jesus' death, paid the price. So it's through Jesus' death. So going back to what we talked about at the start of the episode, because we have already died through Jesus, the law does not govern us anymore. The law no longer has jurisdiction over those who have already died. So now we serve Jesus not out of fear, but out of love and thanksgiving for what he has done for us. Personally, I think this is Paul's way of telling the Romans, stop weaponizing the law.
Yeah.
So, because there have, and we know that, there have been people who have been weaponizing, oh, you need to be circumcised because you are Gentiles and you want to be Christians, you want to be followers. So, I think just Paul's way of telling the Romans, stop weaponizing it. The law is good. The law
he could have just said, cut it out.
TLDR of it, cut it out. Well,
and it was happening then, and it's a message to us today to do this because the same thing happens now. We brought up legalism a few times, but
that's true.
We do stuff like that all the time.
So the bottom line today is very simple. Since we died with Christ, since we died with Jesus, and we have been raised with him, we now serve God as we might serve our spouse. You don't serve your spouse out of obligation. It's like, you're my spouse, so I'm going to cook you dinner.
Sometimes you might do that. You shouldn't do that.
Right. You shouldn't do. Again, see how imperfect we are? But we serve our spouse not out of obligation, but because we love them. I serve Andy because I love her. She serves me because because she loves me.
Sometimes she serves me food because she loves you, which is great. I appreciate
awesome, right? That's why we have the food we have every day or every episode. So it's not out of obligation anymore. It's because of love, because we love Jesus, because we want to show the world that we love Jesus, because we know that this is what makes it's what makes our spouse happy, we do it. And in the same way, because we know that this is what makes Jesus happy, we do it. It's not out of obligation anymore. It's out of love. It's out of love. It's out of love. So, questions to wrestle with. Number 1, are your acts of service to God fueled by love or by obligation? For some, this may be a bitter pill to swallow, but there it is.
Question about this one. Let's say I'm being genuine and I'm trying to ask these questions after this podcast. And I go, okay, I serve in kids ministry at church. Am I doing that out of obligation or out of love? And if, let's say I take a genuine look at it and I go, I think I'm doing it out of obligation. What do I do? Do I stop serving because I'm doing it out of obligation?
No.
Leo, I'm just trying to let you tell me I don't have to volunteer in kids ministry. No, so
that makes you even more like you have to volunteer. I'm just kidding.
What do you do in that? If okay, I asked that first question, and I think at least sometimes it's out of obligation, not out of love. What's a first step to do there?
Here's the thing. Let's put it again in the analogy of marriage. If you find that you have been cooking dinner for your spouse out of obligation, how do you change it so now you're cooking dinner for your spouse out of love? Change this, change the heart, change the mind.
Yeah.
Just love your spouse first and then start cooking again. It's going to be a big difference.
Yeah.
And it is the same way. If you find yourself doing something just because it's part of your religion or it's just out of religious obligation and there's nothing behind it aside from that, change your heart, change your mind. Immerse yourself into who Jesus is and what he has done for you, and start realizing that this man died in your place. He didn't just die on the cross for nothing. He died in your place. That's because he loves you that much. And I think it's just right for us to love him that much as well.
Yeah. Yeah, you think about your spouse analogy. If your husband or wife is like a jerk to you all the time and doesn't treat you well, it's probably a lot harder to cook dinner for them out of love.
Right.
But think about those days, those weeks, months, hopefully years, where your spouse is just amazing and you're like, I can't believe I get to be married to this person. That makes it so much easier to do, whatever it is, cooking food or whatever acts of love for your spouse. Well, we have a perfect Savior who did the ultimate thing for us that no one could ever do anything greater for us.
Like he gave us back our life.
Yeah. So focusing on that and then being intentional about thinking about that while we do those acts of service. I think, okay. Sorry, right. Question number 2.
Question number 2. Have you ever thought of sin as actively taking advantage of you? Sometimes we don't think of it that way, but think of sin as doing that. It's actively taking advantage of you. Once you realize that, how can Paul's description of sin help you plan to resist sin? It's very deep.
Yeah.
That takes some thought.
Yep.
So go ahead. And number 3, whom could you enlist to help keep you from giving into sin and temptation? That's actually a clue how you can answer number 2.
Whom? Interesting.
Whom can you enlist to help you from giving into sin and temptation? There you go. And then next steps.
Yeah, we're going to finish Romans 7.
13 to 25.
I was going to say, it's 13 verses. It's, I think it's the longest number of verses. I think 12 has been the most.
Yes.
So if you can only read 12 of the 13, we'll fill you in on the one you missed when you come back next week. But make sure that you read those verses. Come back next week. Thank you, Pastor Leo.
You're
as
welcome.
Always. It's just so great to come and study Romans with you and learn from you. Thanks to all of you for being here with us. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do that. And then after you subscribe, turn notifications on so that you get notified when the new episodes go live and all the other cool stuff on our YouTube channel too. Or if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, it's the only thing that's on there is the podcast. So you'll only get notified about the podcast. Sorry.
There you go.
But maybe we'll do we'll just have Leo sing
scratch
a song.
And sniff.
And we will work on this. Michael will keep working on the scratch and sniff technology. But until then, join us next time on the Grow Podcast. New episodes go live every single Monday. Make sure you're reading along with us, and then make sure we're putting all these things we're learning into practice. Again, we say it pretty much every week on the Grow podcast. It should be every week, but sometimes I forget. Growth always starts with a next step. And there's a next step for all of us every step of the way in our faith journey while we're here on earth. And even when we get to heaven, we're going to continue to have next steps while we're up there. That's one of the cool things. So
that's right.
Don't think that you're done. Don't think that, I mean, it's awesome that you listen to this podcast and maybe you learn some stuff, but if it's just knowledge and it's not affecting the way that we live and our relationship with God, then we're kind of missing the mark. So
remember the heart and the motivation behind it.
Yeah. So let's put that stuff into practice. You can find those questions in the podcast description or in the YouTube description. So make sure you do that. Join us next time. We love you, New Hope family, and we will see you next time.
Yeah.